It was just like a normal Saturday night. We were getting ready for, into the summer fun, and then
it blew up overnight to 3,200 acres. It's burning in the Columbia River Gorge, about a half mile from Cascade Locks.
I walk outside and look up, and there's just this billowing pile of smoke coming out. 5 a.m. phones are going off, grabbing all the valuables, moved everything away from the house.
Finally got to somewhere safe, but then had to evacuate again when the fire jumped the river to Archer Mountain in Washougal.
And with the fire burning on both sides of the river, firefighters are in short supply.
It just made me feel really vulnerable. You have no control over the situation. The last thing on your mind is thinking about what legislation is happening. It's how are we going to make sure that, no one experiences a greater loss than they already have.
6 days after the fire started, it was only 7% contained. Communities were still in chaos, and no one knew the extent of the fire. Yet that's when Congressman Greg Walden declared the forest destroyed and proposed a new law that would allow tens of thousands of acres of the Columbia Gorge National Scenic Area to be clear-cut without meaningful community input or environmental safeguards.
This is the National Scenic Area. It is not the National Burned Out Snag Area.
Really? If the gorge was completely torched like Walden suggested, it would be obvious from the air. So we took our camera and an expert fire ecologist into the area to see for ourselves.
There's a lot of green trees left, but quite the mosaic. It's just not that big of an impact. It's thinned the forest out. It's created a mosaic. Most of the area, and I think including this fire, when we ultimately have all the data and all the images, most of this was actually good fire from an ecological standpoint.
After the rain put the fire out, experts with the Forest Service prepared a report showing that only 15% of the fire area burned at high intensity. More than half of the 30,000-acre fire perimeter was either unburned or experienced low-severity fire. And as we saw from the air, most of the trees are still alive and well. And science tells us, even the areas that burned intensely are a part of a healthy forest.
I like to think of it as punching some holes out in the landscape, to have a patchwork of different forest ages where we can really start to build in some resilience so that forest can withstand these very natural disturbance events.
As we look at all of these big fires over the entire western United States, while the acres are going up, the proportion of those different severity effects in fire complex hasn't changed much since historical times. So there isn't this notion of these mega fire increases. Acres are going up, but severity hasn't changed much.
Our favorite forests have all burned, including massive fires in the Columbia River Gorge and around Mount Hood, as recently as the early 1900s. What was burned in our grandparents' lives, today we enjoy as green forests. Burns create diversity, habitat for animals and plants, and even views for people.
When there's smoke, when there's loss of life, when there's homes burning, that clearly is a catastrophe. That's a human catastrophe. But from an ecological standpoint, this is not a catastrophe. This has been happening since the time of the dinosaurs. These forests are born to burn.
Lobbyists and politicians like Greg Walden try to convince the public that fire is bad and that logging the forest can prevent fire. But scientific study has revealed that nature creates much more fire-resilient forests than logging does. In fact, over the past 30 years, studies show that forests with the highest level of protection from logging tend to burn least severely, and forests that are logged and planted tend to burn at the highest severity. So, if you don't want your rural house to burn, the timber industry, it turns out, is a bad neighbor.
I like to think about forests in the same way that we think about a campfire. When you build a campfire, if you only put large logs on there, it's not going to burn, right? When you build a campfire, you put kindling in there, and that's the stuff that's really going to get your fire up and going. The forest works the same way. So selectively removing the big trees isn't going to do anything to change fire behavior.
If you listen to folks like Walden and his colleagues in Congress, you'll hear them repeat over and over that burned landscapes need logging to be more resilient, which sounds strange. So once again, we asked a scientist.
Post-fire logging does not improve resilience. In fact, what it does is it degrades the rejuvenating properties of a forest. And forests are gonna come back if we let them. But if we go in and we do clear-cut logging, we take out the components that they need to come back, the big live and dead trees. We spray with herbicides, we build roads, invasive species come in, and we leave slash on the ground that then causes the next big fire event that's an intense burn. They can't come back.
Logging a sensitive burned landscape does not help a forest recover. In fact, more than 500 scientists have told Walden that logging after a fire hinders forest recovery and increases fire risk.
You know, this isn't a logging area, this is a recreation area. And to propose logging the recreational area, you know, after we just had all the trails shut down, I thought it was really messed up.
We have increasing human population numbers and they're moving farther and farther into forests. When we have fires like we had this year that were very close to urban centers, it underscores the need to really get on top of the wildland-urban interface.
Here in Northwest Oregon, it's really important that we have defensible spaces around our homes. If you just look at your house and think if the adjacent area around it caught on fire, you want to have about 30 feet of stuff that's not readily combustible around your home.
So this red tag here, so this meant that if there were fires coming down, that they were not going to protect this house.
If there's 4 or 5 houses that are moderately well prepared, we can finish them up and get them adequately defended in the time it would take us to clean up the one that wasn't. So we will initially write it off. We always hope that we can have more time to come back and put the effort in, but if the fire's moving fast, that red tag may be the last time we see it.
For me, it was like really scary because that's my neighbors that are being told like, your house might burn down.
Congress sees bill after bill using fire as a reason to streamline clear cuts on public land. But few, if any, of these bills include much needed help to make rural communities and their homes safer. So, if we want safe communities and resilient forests, we have to prioritize our limited funds to be used near rural communities and keep chainsaws out of our wild backcountry areas.